They call it unrealistic. They call it impossible. They call it delusional. But what if that word wasn't an insult, but a compass? What if delusional was the label society gives to anyone who refuses to die as a copy? 'Cause from the moment you arrived on this planet, the world started working on you not to make you exceptional, but to make you acceptable. They didn't want you strong. They wanted you manageable. They didn't want you ambitious. They wanted you predictable. Every rule, every routine, every system was designed to push you toward one destination: normal. Normal behavior, normal dreams, normal outcomes. Sit still, follow instructions, don't ask too many questions, don't take too many risks, don't try to stand out. And for a while, maybe you obeyed. Maybe you thought that fitting in was the price to pay to be liked, or at least to avoid being attacked. You played the role. You blended into the background. You pretended that the same things that satisfied them could satisfy you too. But deep down, something kept resisting. You didn't know why, but you were unable to kill that small fire in your gut. A fire that whispered, quietly at first, then louder, "You're meant for more." While they dreamed of comfort, you dreamed of impact. While they chased approval, you craved freedom. While they feared uncertainty, you felt drawn to it. You looked at your life and sensed something no one around you seemed to notice, that the world was in T as solid, or as fixed, or as limited as they believed. You saw possibilities where they saw danger. You saw potential where they saw risk, and you were punished for it. The look started first, those judgmental glances people give you when your ambition makes them uncomfortable. Then came the comments, wrapped in concern. The key, realistic. Don't get your hopes up. People like us don't do that. Why don't you choose something stable? They thought they were helping you. They thought they were protecting you from disappointment. But what they were really doing was protecting themselves from the discomfort of watching someone break free while they remained stuck. They needed you to stay normal because your refusal to shrink reminded them of everything they gave up on. But no matter how many times they tried to box you in, something inside you refused to fold. You didn't choose this. You didn't wake up one day and decide to be different. You were built this way. You process the world differently. You feel differently. You think in directions that scare people. Your imagination is too big for their comfort zone. Your ambition is too loud for their quiet life. And instead of celebrating it, they tried to dim it. For years, you tried to silence your own mind. You tried to follow the script. You tried to deny the voice in your chest that kept telling you you were meant for a life that doesn't yet exist. You convinced yourself that maybe they were right, that wanting more was wrong, that dreaming too big was childish, that your potential was just your ego lying to you. But every time you tried to be realistic, something in you died a little. Your energy faded. Your motivation collapsed. Soul felt disconnected from your own life. 'Cause the truth is simple. You were never meant to be normal. You were never wired for mediocrity. You were never built to fit the mold. You were designed to break it. And the world senses that about you. They don't know how to explain it, but they feel it. They feel your intensity. They feel your hunger. They feel your refusal to settle, okay? It makes them uncomfortable because it exposes their own lack of courage. People don't hate ambition. They hate what it reveals about their own choices. You walk differently. You think differently. You dream differently. And deep down, you've always known it. Even when you didn't have words for it. Even when you tried to hide it. Okay. Even when you wished you could be satisfied with what satisfies them. But you can't. You never will. And that's not a flaw. That's your destiny speaking. You were never supposed to be normal. You were supposed to be the exception. Every legend was once labeled crazy. People forget that part. They look at the success, the trophies, the money, the chapters written after the victory. But they ignore the beginning, the part where the world points at you and laughs. It's the part where people whisper behind your back. The part where they call you delusional, simply because you see a reality that hasn't happened yet. Every person who ever changed the world had to carry that insult on their back long before they earned respect. Because when your vision is bigger than other people's courage, they respond with mockery. Think about it. Nobody called Steve Jobs a genius when he was building computers in a garage. They said he was wasting his time. Nobody called Elon Musk a visionary when he said he'd revolutionize cars and send rockets to space. They said he was insane. Nobody believed in Muhammad Ali when he said he'd be the greatest before he had even won a title. They said he was arrogant, delusional, out of touch with reality. But history has a funny way of rewarding the people who refuse to shrink their dreams to the size of other people's expectations. And here's the truth nobody wants to admit. The word delusional is not a description. It's a defense mechanism. People use it to protect themselves from the pain of realizing they gave up too early. When you say you're going to do something extraordinary, they don't hear your ambition. They hear their regrets. They hear every dream they abandoned, every risk they never took, every version of themselves they let die. You're not their enemy, you're their mirror. And that reflection hurts. Humans fear what they can't measure. They fear what doesn't fit the pattern. Society is built on routines, on repetition, on predictability. And when someone comes along who doesn't fit, who doesn't fold, who doesn't obey the unspoken rule of staying small, society labels them as broken. But the truth is inverted. It's the world that's broken, not the people who try to rise above it. Look at anyone who ever achieved greatness, and you'll find something fascinating. They all tell the same story. The story of being misunderstood. The story of being doubted. The story of being called unrealistic. And yet, they kept going. Not because they had proof. Not because they were supported. But because they felt something inside themselves that nobody else could feel. A pull, a calling, a conviction. Greatness doesn't start when the world believes in you. It starts when you believe in yourself before you have any reason to, before you have results, before you have validation, before you have anything except faith in your own potential. That's what delusional truly means, believing in a future that your present cannot justify yet. And that belief is uncomfortable for you and for everyone around you. Because once you start dreaming bigger, people start projecting their limits onto you. They pretend it's advice, but it's insecurity. They pretend it's logic, but it's fear. They pretend they care, but really, they are terrified you might succeed. Because if you do, it proves that everything they told themselves about life being small and restricted was a lie. Your success becomes a threat to their identity. So of course they laugh. Of course they doubt. Of course they try to pull you back to their level. They need you to fail so their worldview feels safe again. But what they don't realize is that calling you delusional doesn't weaken you, it forges you. Every time someone doubts you, it adds a layer of armor. Every time someone mocks you, it strengthens your resolve. Every time they say you can't, a part of you whispers, watch me. The craziest part, the moment you begin to rise just slightly, those same people will pretend they always believed in you. They'll rewrite history. They'll say they saw potential. They'll claim they knew you were different. Because success turned your delusion into vision, and your vision into proof. Society doesn't respect belief. It respects results. Till then, you'll be misunderstood. And that's okay. It's because being misunderstood is the birthplace of greatness. The legends you admire weren't extraordinary because the world believed in them. They became extraordinary because they kept going when the world didn't. And whether you realize it or not, you're walking the same path. That discomfort you feel, it's not a sign that you're wrong. It's a sign that you're becoming someone the world isn't ready for yet. At some point, you hit a stage that almost nobody talks about. A stage where you stop trying to convince the world. A stage where you stop defending your dreams. A stage where you realize that being understood is not a requirement for becoming great. This is the moment you cross the invisible line between wanting validation and choosing conviction. And once you cross it, there is no way back. Before that moment, you still hesitate. You still adjust your words around certain people. Q. Still soften your ambitions so you don't make others uncomfortable. You still explain instead of letting your actions speak. And every time you do that, you betray a part of yourself. But then one day, something snaps. You get tired of negotiating with fear, okay? You get tired of shrinking to fit rooms that were never meant for you. You get tired of defending a vision that only exists in your head. And that's when you finally accept the truth. You will be misunderstood no matter what you do. Okay? So you might as well be misunderstood for who you truly are. That acceptance is terrifying because it feels like stepping into isolation. It feels like cutting invisible social ropes that once made you feel safe. You realize that your path will not be crowded, that your conversations will change, that your relationships will shift, that some people will no longer recognize you not because you changed for the worse, but because you finally stopped pretending. The world teaches you to seek approval, like oxygen, likes, praise, acceptance, belonging. But greatness demands the opposite. It demands the ability to walk forward while being doubted, to work while being judged, to dream while being mocked, to rise while being ignored. Hey, when you truly internalize that, something powerful happens inside you. Silence becomes your strength. You stop announcing your goals. You stop needing external confirmation. You stop fighting every misunderstanding. You understand that your future results will answer every question more convincingly than your voice ever could. Being misunderstood hardens you. It sharpens your focus. It forces you to listen inward instead of outward. When you stop seeking validation, you unlock a dangerous kind of freedom to move without permission. The freedom to fail without shame. The freedom to rebuild without explanation. And in that freedom, your real strength is born. But there is a cost. Make no mistake about it. Accepting misunderstanding means choosing emotional loneliness. It means watching conversations die because your vision no longer fits the room. It means outgrowing people you once needed. It means feeling isolated even in familiar places. And there will be nights when the doubt creeps back in. Nights when you wonder if they were right after all. Nights when the weight of walking alone feels too heavy. That's the price of becoming uncommon, and most people are not willing to pay it. But you are not most people, because when you look at your life, you don't want to remember a version of yourself that played it safe. You don't want to reach the end carrying the regret of potential unused. You don't want your story to end with, at least I fit in. You want your story to end with impact, with legacy, with proof that your belief wasn't madness, it was foresight. Once you accept being misunderstood, your self-belief evolves. It becomes quieter, but unbreakable. You no longer need to prove your worth in conversations. You let time do the talking. You let discipline do the arguing. You let results deliver the verdict. In the same world that doubted you will one day study you in silence. They will still call you crazy. They will still call you unrealistic. They will still call you delusional. But now, those words no longer shake you. They fuel you, because you finally understand something they never will. Self-belief isn't about being realistic. It's about being relentless. And the moment you stop needing the world to believe in you, it's the moment the world no longer has any power over you. There's a moment in every journey where the noise stops not because people finally support you, but because they've dismissed you completely. They think you failed already. They think your ambition was just a phase. They think you've quietly given up like everyone else. That silence is not peaceful. It's suffocating, okay? It's the first real test of anyone who chooses an uncommon path. When no one believes in you, something strange happens. You start to hear your own thoughts more clearly. You start noticing which dreams are genuinely yours and which ones were only fueled by external applause. Okay? You begin to understand that the world will not clap for you in the beginning because the world doesn't applaud potential. It only applauds proof. Okay? You don't have proof yet. You just have hunger. You have vision. You have that fire that burns inside your chest and refuses to die. But to everyone else, it's invisible. So they look at your efforts and shrug. They see you working late and assume it's pointless. They watch you sacrifice comfort and think you're delusional. And the worst part is not their doubts, how quietly it settles into your environment. Conversations change. People stop asking about your goals. Some avoid the topic altogether. Others give you that polite smile that says, "I knew you wouldn't make it." They don't say it out loud, but you feel it. You feel it in the pauses, in the silence, in the way they shift the subject when you speak. Your ambition makes them uncomfortable, so they pretend it doesn't exist. This is the moment when most people break. Not because the path is hard, but because walking it alone feels unbearable. Humans are addicted to validation. We want to be seen. We want to be acknowledged. We want to feel like our effort matters. But when you choose a dream bigger than the environment you grew up in, you must accept a cold reality. You'll walk the first miles completely alone. No applause, no recognition, no encouragement, just you and the weight of your own belief. And that's when your mind starts to turn against you. You begin questioning everything. Why am I doing this? What if they're right? What if I'm wasting my time? Why do I feel so alone? That inner war is brutal because there's no one around to reassure you. You don't have results yet. You don't have momentum yet. You don't have evidence that your belief is justified. So all you have is the whisper in your chest telling you not to quit. And that whisper is the only thing standing between you and becoming ordinary. People think that success is about talent or luck, but the truth is far uglier. Success begins in the moments where you have every reason to stop and no reason to continue except for your own conviction. This silence, this absence of support, this emotional isolation, it's not a punishment, it's preparation. The universe removes the voices around you so you can finally hear your own. When no one believes in you, the only belief you're left with is yours. Okay? And that's exactly how you discover whether your ambition is real or just decoration. Because if you only move when people cheer, you're not driven, you're dependent. But if you keep moving when the world goes quiet, you become unstoppable. Here's the truth they don't teach you. Being ignored is part of the process. In fact, it's the filter that removes everyone who shouldn't make it to the top. This phase is supposed to feel lonely. It's supposed to feel heavy. It's supposed to feel like nobody cares, because nobody does, yet. You haven't become the person they will care about. You're still in the becoming stage, and becoming is uncomfortable. So, instead of searching for approval, use the silence. Use the doubt. Use the isolation. Let it harden you. Let it strip away every excuse. Let it force you to become someone who can carry their ambition without needing witnesses. Because one day, the same people who stopped asking about your dreams will start asking how you did it. The same people who doubted your effort will swear they always believed in you. The same people who ignored your work will pretend they supported you from the start. That's how it always goes. But until that day comes, remember this. Greatness begins in the dark when nobody is watching and nobody believes. At some point, doubt stops being noise around you and becomes a voice inside you. That's when the real battle begins. When the disbelief of others is no longer external, but internal. When their skepticism starts to sound like your own thoughts. This is the most dangerous phase of the journey, not because the world is against you, but because your own mind starts negotiating with your fear. You wake up one morning and feel the weight without knowing why. It's a discipline that once felt automatic suddenly feels heavy. The routine feels pointless. The dream that used to light you up now scares you. And the question appears, quietly at first, then louder. What if this really is all pointless? That's the moment when most people confuse doubt with truth. They start believing that just because something feels uncertain, it must be wrong. But doubt is not wisdom. Doubt is simply the price of walking into the unknown. Your mind is built for survival, not for greatness. It wants safety. It wants familiarity. It wants patterns. And when you step outside of those patterns, your mind triggers alarms. It floods you with worst-case scenarios. It creates images of failure, of humiliation, of loss. It tells you that stopping now would be smarter, that returning to what's predictable would be more reasonable, that nobody will blame you for choosing comfort. And that's exactly the problem. Quitting always comes with logic. You can always justify surrender. You can always find reasons to explain why now is not the right time, why the conditions are wrong, why you need to wait, why you should be patient. And if you listen carefully, you'll realize something uncomfortable. Most people who failed at their dreams didn't fail because they weren't capable. They failed because they listened to the voice that wanted to protect them from discomfort. The mind doesn't want you to rise. It wants you to survive. So when you feel doubt creeping in, it doesn't mean your dream is wrong. It means your comfort zone is being threatened. It means your identity is changing. It means your old version is fighting for its life. And that fight is brutal, because it doesn't look like fear. It looks like responsibility. It looks like realism. It looks like maturity. It tells you to grow up, to stop chasing unrealistic goals, to settle into something safe. But here's the truth that separates builders from sleepers. Growth always feels irresponsible to the old you. Evolution always feels reckless to the version of you that survived by playing small. And the more you move forward, the louder that internal resistance becomes. Not because you're wrong, but because you're close. That's what nobody warned you about. The closer you get to breaking through, the heavier the doubt becomes. The harder it gets to stay disciplined. The easier it gets to justify rest that lasts forever. Your motivation drops. Your clarity blurs. Your emotions fluctuate. You start to feel isolated, not just socially, but mentally. You no longer fully belong to your old world, but you haven't arrived in a new one yet. You're suspended between who you were and who you're becoming. And that space is unstable. This is where self-belief is truly tested. It's not when you're inspired, not when things are moving fast, not when progress is obvious, but when everything feels slow, silent, and uncertain, when every rep feels heavier, when every step feels delayed, when nothing feels guaranteed. That's when belief becomes a decision instead of a feeling. You don't wake up confident every day. Some days you wake up tired, confused, doubtful, but you move anyway. Not because you feel powerful, but because you refuse to betray your future for temporary relief. You train your body while your mind is shaking. You work while your emotions are unstable. You stay disciplined while your motivation is leaking. And over time, something shifts. Slowly, quietly, invisibly. You stop needing certainty to move. You stop waiting to feel ready. You stop making decisions based on comfort, okay? And that's when you cross from dreamer to builder. Doubt never fully disappears. It just loses its authority. It can exist in your head without controlling your actions. You learn to hear it without obeying it. You learn to function even when confidence is low. And that skill moving without emotional permission, what separates the ones who rise from the ones who retreat. Because anyone can feel strong when everything is going well, but only a few can stay disciplined when everything feels uncertain. And that's who you're becoming. There comes a moment when something inside you hardens, subtle. There's no explosion, no dramatic breakthrough, just a quiet shift in how you experience the world. You stop reacting the same way to doubt. You stop flinching at silence. You stop needing people to understand you in order to move. It's the moment where loneliness stops feeling like a punishment and starts feeling like a training ground. You don't notice it at first, but one day you realize that the absence of support no longer weakens you. It sharpens you. You realize that the isolation that once drained you is now building something inside you that comfort never could. You stop looking around for reassurance. You stop adjusting your pace to match others. You stop explaining yourself. Quiet becomes cleaner, quieter, more dangerous. This is what nobody romanticizes about success, the emotional numbness that precedes power. You don't cry as easily anymore. You don't get excited as easily either. You become centered, heavy, still, focused. Your emotions no longer run the show. They exist, but they don't decide. You move even when you feel empty. You work even when you feel disconnected. You stay disciplined even when you feel nothing. And that's when you become truly difficult to stop. Because motivation can be stolen. Confidence can be shaken. Okay? But discipline, built in silence, is unbreakable. You begin to understand that the early loneliness was never about rejection. It was about separation. The universe was pulling you away from the noise so it could reshape you without interference. Every night you worked alone while others slept. Every time you doubted yourself but kept going anyway. Every morning you woke up tired and chose discipline over comfort. All of it was carving something into your nervous system. Resilience. Not the kind you talk about. It's the kind that lives in your posture, in your eyes, in the way you breathe under pressure. You stop fantasizing about success and start preparing for it. You organize your days differently. You protect your time differently. You speak less. You observe more. You don't waste energy convincing people anymore because you finally understand something. The ones who doubt you now are not your audience. They are not your future, okay? They are a temporary part of your environment, not the destination of your life. And that realization gives you emotional independence. You are no longer desperate to be seen. You are no longer addicted to approval. You are no longer negotiating with your ambition. You become calm about it, cold about it, serious about it. This is the stage where most people would misread you. They might think you lost your passion. They might think you became distant. They might think you gave up. But the truth is the opposite. You didn't lose your fire. You contained it. You didn't become weaker. You became quieter. And quiet strength is the most dangerous kind, because loud ambition attracts attention. Silent discipline attracts results. You stop telling people what you're going to do. You show them through patterns, through consistency, through the way your habits refuse to bend. You build in the shadows. You stack invisible wins. You grow without announcing it. And something strange happens when you do that. The world begins to shift around you without your permission. Opportunities start appearing where there were none before. People start reacting differently to you without knowing why. Your presence changes. The way you speak changes. The way you decide changes. You are not louder, but you are heavier. You carry yourself like someone who knows where they're going, even if nobody else can see the destination yet. And the loneliness that once terrified you, it becomes sacred, because it's in that loneliness that you built the version of yourself that no one was around to witness. It's in that silence that your standards rose. It's in that darkness that your self-belief stopped being emotional and became structural. You no longer believe in yourself because you feel inspired. You believe in yourself because you watched yourself survive when nothing was certain. And that belief is different. It doesn't beg, doesn't seek permission. It doesn't shake when challenged. Simply moves forward. Most people will never understand this phase. They'll think the struggle is about money or recognition or success. The real struggle was always internal. It was about whether you could become someone strong enough to handle the life you say you want. And in the silence, in the doubt, in the absence of support, that's exactly what you were becoming. This is not the end of the road. This is the end of the beginning. The world still doesn't believe in you. But now, you no longer need it to. There is a war happening inside your head every single day. It doesn't look dramatic from the outside. There are no explosions, no shouting, no visible scars. But make no mistake, this is the most violent battlefield you will ever step onto. 'Cause it's not you versus the world anymore. It's you versus yourself. Two voices live in your mind. One speaks the language of comfort. It tells you to slow down, to rest a little longer, okay? That skipping one session won't matter. That tomorrow is just as good as today. That you deserve to take it easy after everything you've been through. It sounds kind. It sounds reasonable. It sounds like self-care. But beneath the softness, there is one goal: to keep you exactly where you are. The other voice is colder, quieter, less emotional. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care how you feel. It only cares about what you said you wanted. It reminds you of the life you claimed you were willing to suffer for. It brings up your promises when your motivation is gone. It doesn't shout. It waits. And when excuses rise, it simply asks one question: is this who you said you wanted to be? Every day, one of those voices gets stronger, whichever one you feed. Most people think discipline comes from motivation. They're wrong. Motivation is a feeling. It rises, it falls, disappears when life gets heavy. Discipline is a decision repeated until it becomes identity. The war in your head is not about energy. It's about standards. It's about whether you live according to what feels good or according to what builds you. You feel it in the smallest moments: when the alarm rings, when the weight feels heavy, when the work feels endless, when nobody is watching. That's where the real fight happens. Not in public, not in moments of inspiration, but in isolation, where there are no witnesses and no applause. Just you and the decision you're about to make. And right there, comfort always sounds smarter. Key tells you to protect your energy, to avoid burnout, to be patient. Key to slow the pace. And sometimes those things are true. But your mind doesn't differentiate between recovery and retreat. It uses the same language for both. And if you're not careful, you'll start calling fear rest and calling avoidance balance. The disciplined voice doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't beg. It just stands there, unflinching. It understands something the comfort voice never will. Pain is temporary, but identity is permanent. It knows that every time you choose the easier option, you move one step closer to becoming a weaker version of yourself. And every time you choose the harder option, you reinforce the person you're trying to become. This is not a dramatic transformation. There is no soundtrack, no cinematic slow motion. It's thousands of boring, painful, repetitive decisions that slowly reshape your nervous system. The days blur together. The effort feels thankless. Progress feels invisible. And yet, something is changing beneath the surface. Something you can't see yet, but will feel later. The comfort voice will never fully disappear. It evolves. When you beat it at one level, it comes back wearing better arguments. When you get stronger, it becomes more subtle. It stops saying quit and starts saying you've done enough. It stops saying give up and starts saying you deserve a break. And if you listen closely, you'll notice the pattern. Every time you're about to grow, that voice shows up dressed as wisdom. That's why this war never ends. It only changes locations, but so do you. Okay? Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you don't just complete a task, you upgrade your identity. Okay? You become someone who keeps their word to themselves. Someone whose actions are not controlled by emotion. Someone whose self-belief is no longer an idea, but a habit. And that's dangerous, because once you prove to yourself that you can move without feeling ready, you become harder to manipulate. Once you realize that you don't need motivation to act, you become harder to stop. Once you understand that your strongest days and your weakest days deserve the same level of discipline, your progress detaches from your mood. Okay? And from that moment on, the war changes. It's no longer about whether you'll stay consistent. It becomes about how far you're willing to push. While others scroll, you train. While others sleep, you build. While others complain, you prepare. This is the quiet contrast that defines the few who rise from the many who stall. There is no parade for this phase, so no one claps for discipline in private. No one celebrates the nights you choose effort over ease. And that's exactly why it works, because real separation never happens in public. It happens in the invisible hours. Your routine becomes your battlefield, waking up when your body begs for rest, showing up when your mind is heavy, repeating actions that feel boring, painful, and unrewarding in the moment. There is nothing exciting about this process. It doesn't feel heroic. It feels mechanical. And that's the trap most people fall into. They chase excitement instead of precision. Okay. They wait for inspiration instead of building systems. Okay. And they mistake comfort for balance. You don't rise because you felt inspired. You rise because you refuse to negotiate with your standards. At first, the sacrifice feels loud. You feel every temptation you're avoiding, every party you decline, every late night you replace with work, every comfort you delay. You feel the hunger, you feel the frustration, you feel the isolation, and a part of you wonders if it's worth it. But discipline is not built by convincing yourself. It's built by enduring long enough to see your identity change. One day, you notice something subtle. You stop arguing with yourself before doing the work. Stop bargaining for easier options. You just move. It's not because you're motivated, but because this is who you are now. Effort has become default, okay? And that's when people start misunderstanding you even more, okay? They say you're obsessed. They say you've changed, okay? They say you're too extreme. But what they really mean is this. Your discipline makes their laziness uncomfortable. You begin to live in asymmetry. You eat differently, sleep differently. You spend your time differently. Your conversations change. Your humor changes. Your patience for nonsense disappears. You become sharper, more intentional, less distracted. And the more aligned you become with your path, the more disconnected you feel from the world you're leaving behind. That tension is violent internally. You're no longer fully part of the old life, but you haven't reached the new one yet. You're suspended between versions of yourself. Oh, one foot in who you were, one foot in who you're becoming. And this phase demands an enormous emotional price, because it feels like being out of place everywhere. Too disciplined for the crowd. It's not accomplished enough for the destination. This is where people usually self-sabotage. They try to rebalance their effort to feel socially comfortable again, okay? They slow down to fit in, compromise their routine to be liked. They dilute their hunger to avoid standing out, and in doing so, they quietly return to the very life they claimed they wanted to escape. But you don't. You keep training, you keep building, keep showing up, and what begins as raw effort slowly turns into quiet confidence. Not the loud kind that seeks attention, but the heavy kind that doesn't care for opinion. You don't feel the need to explain your pace anymore. You know why you're moving. You know what you're building. And that clarity makes you calm. Your sacrifices no longer feel like losses. They feel like investments. Every night you choose discipline over distraction becomes a deposit into your future, okay? Even though you can't touch the interest yet, you can feel the account growing. Stronger habits, sharper focus, higher standards, deeper self-respect. And self-respect is intoxicating, because when you start respecting yourself, you become allergic to mediocrity. You stop tolerating environments that drain you. You stop entertaining conversations that shrink you. You stop negotiating with impulses that sabotage you. Your discipline creates borders around your life, and those borders protect your ambition. What you're really building in this phase is not success, it's capacity. The capacity to handle pressure, to function under fatigue, to stay focused under boredom, to remain serious in a world addicted to entertainment. And that capacity is what will later support everything you think you want right now. Most people collapse under the weight of the life they asked for because they never built the structure to carry it. You are doing that now, quietly, patiently, painfully, and one day, when the results arrive, people will call it luck, but you will remember the nights, the isolation, the routine, the discipline when nobody cared, and you'll know exactly why you deserved it. There comes a point where loneliness stops feeling like a weakness and starts becoming a weapon. At first, it hurts. You feel the absence of support, like a physical weight. You question yourself more. You overthink. You interpret the silence around your ambition as a sign that maybe you're not meant for this. But with time and enough repetitions, something unexpected happens. The loneliness that once felt like abandonment becomes the environment where your strength is forged. In the beginning, you crave connection. You wish someone understood the pressure you carry. You wish someone saw the hours you're putting in. You wish someone recognized the sacrifices you're making. But greatness is never built under the gaze of others. It's built in the shadows, in the moments where the only witness to your effort is your own reflection. That loneliness isn't punishment, it's calibration. It's stripping away the distractions, the noise, the voices that blur your direction. It's leaving you alone with the truth of your ambition. At first, that truth is uncomfortable, because when there is no one around to cheer you up, to reassure you, to guide you, you must face the rawest part of yourself. Your fears, your insecurities, your emotional weaknesses, your lack of control. All the parts you can hide in public become impossible to avoid in solitude, and that confrontation breaks most people, but not you. Slowly, you start to realize that solitude is a mirror, not a prison. It reflects the version of yourself you haven't grown into yet. And the longer you stay with it, the more you start seeing your potential instead of your limitations. You begin noticing how much of your life was shaped by external influence, opinions, expectations, criticism, social pressure. When all that fades, what's left is the purest form of self-belief. Not loud, not arrogant, not performative, silent, heavy, unshakable. You discover that you don't actually need people to understand your dream. You don't need them to validate your effort. You don't need their encouragement to move. The only thing you truly need is alignment with your vision, your discipline, and the person you're becoming. And once that alignment clicks, loneliness transforms into focus. The nights that once felt empty become productive. The silence that once felt oppressive becomes peaceful. The distance from others becomes clarity. You start to enjoy being alone. Not because you dislike people, but because you no longer depend on them emotionally. You no longer need a motivating environment. You create your own motivation. You no longer wait for external push. You've built internal momentum. And that shift is what separates people who want success from people who can handle success. Because success demands emotional independence. If you rely on support, you'll crumble under pressure. If you rely on praise, you'll collapse when criticized. If you rely on company, you'll fall apart when isolated. When on the other hand, have learned to operate alone. And that is one of the most underrated skills in the world. High performers aren't sustained by hype. They're sustained by solitude. Not the sad kind, the intentional kind. It's the kind that sharpens your mind. The kind that protects your energy. It's the kind that grows your ambition instead of shrinking it. Over time, something even more powerful happens. The loneliness that once weighed on you becomes the very thing that fuels you. You look around and realize that few people wake up early willingly. Few people sacrifice comfort for purpose. Few people train when tired. Few people build without recognition. Few people embrace the silence long enough for the transformation to happen. And that scarcity becomes your advantage. You understand now why so few individuals ever rise. It's not because they lack talent or opportunity. It's because they cannot tolerate the isolation required to become who they need to be. They crave company more than growth, approval more than progress, comfort more than purpose. But you have learned to breathe in environments where others suffocate. Your solitude has become your edge, because when you're alone, you're not distracted, you're not influenced, you're not slowed down. You hear your own thoughts, you build your own habits, you create your own identity, And the person you're becoming in silence is someone the world won't be ready for. Eventually, the results will come. The momentum will come. The recognition will come. And people will mistake your strength for confidence, not realizing it was carved through years of isolation. They'll think you were born disciplined, not understanding the nights you spent fighting yourself. They'll think your self-belief was natural, not knowing it was built from nothing but silence and struggle. Let them think whatever they want. You know the truth. Loneliness didn't break you. It made you dangerous. At first, the results don't look like success. They look insignificant, almost embarrassing. A tiny increase. A small signal, a quiet shift that nobody else notices. You want fireworks, but all you get is a flicker. You want confirmation, but all you receive is a whisper. And that's exactly where most people lose patience. They think progress should be loud. They think change should be obvious. They think transformation should be dramatic. But the truth is colder. Real momentum begins so quietly that only the disciplined can hear it. Your first win doesn't change your life. It changes your belief. It might be the first time you execute without hesitation. The first time you commit without doubt. The first time you followed through when quitting would have been easier. From the outside, it means nothing. From the inside, it changes everything. Because for the first time, your delusion produces evidence. Not enough to impress the world, but enough to remind you that you're not crazy. You feel it in your body before you see it in numbers. Your posture changes slightly. Your voice becomes calmer. Your decisions become cleaner. You're less reactive, less emotional, less desperate. You start trusting your process more than your mood. And even though the world still sees no difference, something in you knows the machine has started moving. But here's the brutal part. They still don't care. The people who doubted you don't suddenly applaud because your progress is still too small for their standards. They don't celebrate your discipline because it doesn't benefit them yet. They don't acknowledge your growth because it hasn't crossed their threshold of respect. And for a second, you feel that old frustration rise again. The urge to prove. The urge to show. The urge to say, look, I told you. And that's the second test. The test of staying silent when you finally have something to show. Because this phase is fragile. The momentum is real, but it's still young. And young momentum is easily killed by ego, distraction, and the need for recognition. You don't need validation right now. You need protection. It's protection of your routine, protection of your focus, protection of your direction. It's the worst thing you can do at this stage is expose your progress too early to environments that don't understand it. So instead of announcing your wins, you internalize them. Instead of celebrating publicly, you sharpen privately. Instead of relaxing, you double down. Instead of slowing your pace, you increase your precision. And something strange happens when you do that. The microwinds begin stacking faster, not explosively, but consistently. Your output becomes steadier. Your confidence becomes quieter, but heavier. Your self-respect stops depending on moods and starts depending on execution. You no longer ask yourself, do I feel like it? You ask, did I do what I said I would do? That's the moment where self-belief stops being theoretical. It becomes operational. You no longer believe in yourself because you imagine the future. You believe in yourself because you've seen your own behavior change. And behavior is truth. Your sleep habits shift. Your discipline stabilizes. Your attention span grows. Your tolerance for excuses disappears. You're still far from the life you want, but you're no longer the same person who started wanting it. And that gap matters more than anyone watching from the outside could ever understand. From their perspective, nothing has changed. Okay? From yours, everything has. This is the danger zone. It's a place where many people lose their edge. Because once you taste progress, comfort starts negotiating again. You're doing better now. You deserve a break. You've proven your point. You can slow down. You're not failing any more relax. And if you're not ruthless with your standards here, the same voice that once tried to stop you will now try to soften you. That's why most people never break through. They mistake early proof for arrival. But you don't. You understand that the first evidence is not permission to rest. It's proof that the system works. So you don't chase celebration. You chase replication. You repeat the behaviors that produced the win. You reinforce the standards that kept you moving. You treat every micro-success as a blueprint, not a trophy. And slowly, invisibly, your trajectory changes. You're still underground, still underestimated, still unnoticed. But now, you're no longer guessing. You felt the machine respond to your effort. And once that happens, the delusion becomes dangerous, because now it's backed by experience. Your first signs of progress arrive quietly, too quietly. You're expecting people to notice. You're expecting a shift in how they speak to you, maybe even a little respect, but nothing happens. No reaction, no acknowledgement, no recognition. The world looks at your first steps and sees nothing impressive, nothing special, nothing worth changing their opinion for. To them, you're still the same dreamer with unrealistic goals, still the same person they gently remind to stay grounded, still the same outsider chasing something they believe is too big for you. And at first, that stings, because even if you pretend otherwise, a part of you was hoping they'd see it. A part of you wanted validation, not because you needed it to continue, but because you wanted confirmation that the tides were finally turning. Instead, your early progress is met with indifference. Not hatred, not mockery, just indifference. As if your effort is invisible. But here's the truth. To them, it is invisible. They don't see the internal battles you've overcome. They don't see the consistency you've built. They don't see the identity you've reshaped. They judge your progress by results, not transformation. They only acknowledge change when it benefits them. And since your growth hasn't reached a level that impacts their perception, they act like nothing is happening. You show up differently. You think differently. You move differently. But they don't adjust their view of you because, to them, you're still operating within the range of who you used to be. This is where a lot of people collapse. They confuse external silence for internal failure. They think, if nobody sees it, maybe it's not real. And that's how early momentum dies, not because it wasn't working, but because the lack of external reaction convinces them to stop. But you're playing a different game now. You've matured. You've seen the first flicker of proof. And even if it's small, it's yours. You feel something building inside you that no one else can feel yet. You see the subtle shifts they're blind to. You notice the difference in your discipline, your focus, your energy, your clarity, your patience. It's the way you execute now versus the way you used to hesitate. These changes are invisible externally, but structural internally. And that makes them priceless. 'Cause here's the secret. Nobody tells you. Your first results aren't meant to convince the world. They're meant to convince you. The world celebrated every early effort. Nobody would quit. But the universe has a brutal filter. Only those who can continue without applause will ever earn it. Small progress forces you to rely on self-belief. Slow progress forces you to build patience. Invisible progress forces you to develop internal validation. And internal validation is a superpower. It's people who depend on recognition die early in the journey. They burn out the moment the tension fades. Peace. But people who build without witnesses develop an identity that is immune to silence. They operate from self-respect, not from applause. You're becoming one of them. And while the world still sees nothing impressive, you notice everything. It's the way you handle pressure better than before. The way your negative thoughts lose their power faster. The way you recover from setbacks with more control. The way your discipline speaks louder than your emotions. These are not small improvements. They are the blueprint of greatness being installed. Their silence doesn't discourage you anymore. Okay, it fuels you. Every time they overlook your progress, it reinforces a truth you've started to accept. Your journey was never supposed to be understood by the people who stopped walking long ago. They don't see the value in small progress because they gave up before they ever felt it. They expect dramatic results because they never stuck around long enough to respect the boring ones. That's why your first wins don't impress them. They don't understand the cost behind them. Let them underestimate you. Let them overlook you. Let them think nothing is happening because their blindness is your camouflage. You're evolving quietly in a world that only respects loud results. You're building a foundation they don't know exists. You're stacking wins too subtle for their untrained eyes. One day, those tiny wins will compound into something undeniable. Not because the world suddenly believed in you, but because you continued long enough for them to lose the option not to. They can ignore you now. They won't be able to ignore what's coming. At some point, your progress stops feeling accidental. It doesn't feel like luck anymore. It doesn't feel like a temporary spike. It feels repeatable. And that's when something dangerous happens inside you. You stop hoping. You start expecting. Not arrogantly, not loudly, but with a quiet certainty that terrifies the part of you that used to doubt. You no longer ask, "Can I do this again?" You ask, "How far can I take this?" That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Because now, your confidence is no longer emotional. It's mechanical. It's built on patterns. It's on habits. On proof of behavior. You've seen yourself show up tired. You've seen yourself stay consistent when motivation was gone. You've seen yourself push through silence, boredom, and uncertainty. And once you've watched yourself survive that, it's very hard to go back to believing you're weak. But here's the danger of this phase. You're still early, still small in the grand scheme, still fragile in momentum, yet inside, you feel powerful for the first time. Okay. That combination is explosive. This is where many people self-destruct not because they failed, but because they succeeded too early. Taste progress and assume the war is over. They ease the pressure. They loosen standards. They give comfort a seat at the table again. They tell themselves they've earned the right to relax. And slowly, the same discipline that built their momentum begins to decay. Not violently, quietly. One skipped session, one delayed decision, one compromised standard. And the machine that was just starting to turn begins to slow. You must understand this. Early proof is not a signal to rest. It's a warning to become even more precise. This is the stage where your old self tries to return wearing confidence as a disguise. It tells you that you've changed now, that you're no longer that person who had to grind so hard that you can afford to loosen your grip. But the truth is, Brutal, new self isn't solid yet. It's still under construction. The structure is forming, but the concrete hasn't fully set. Its pressure must remain. You don't protect momentum by lowering intensity. You protect it by stabilizing your standards. This is where you upgrade your discipline from effort-based to identity-based. You stop saying, "I'm trying." You start saying, "This is who I am now." You stop seeing your routine as a phase. You see it as your default. You stop chasing bursts of productivity. You build non-negotiable systems. You no longer rely on willpower. You rely on design. Your environment changes. Your inputs change. Your boundaries change. You become ruthless with what you allow near your focus. Distractions you once tolerated now feel toxic. Conversations that once felt normal now feel draining. You feel it instinctively. Anything that pulls you away from your trajectory feels like a threat. That's not obsession. It's alignment. And alignment is addictive. The more aligned you become, the heavier your presence feels. Okay? You speak less because you're no longer trying to convince anyone. You move with more intention because you're no longer chasing approval. You don't announce your goals anymore because you're too busy executing them. Your energy becomes colder, calmer, more concentrated, still unnoticed by the world, but no longer unnoticed by you. And that's the true turning point. Because once you stop needing external confirmation to continue, your growth becomes independent, immune, ruthless. You can be ignored without slowing down. You can be doubted without reacting. You can be underestimated without correcting anyone. You simply build. This is where your delusion fully transforms. It's no longer imagination. It's direction. You no longer believe in the future because you hope. You believe in it because you're already living like the person who belongs there. Your habits match your declaration. Your discipline matches your ambition. Your sacrifice matches your vision. And that coherence is rare. Most people want the identity without the isolation, the reward without the repetition, the future without the discomfort. You chose the opposite. Right now, the world still sees nothing impressive. You're still early, still underground, still unknown, but the internal shift has already happened. You are no longer experimenting. You are no longer guessing. You are no longer waiting. You are executing with intent. And once execution becomes identity, the outcome is no longer a question of if, only when. The first real win feels different. It's not the tiny shifts, not the small internal confirmations. No, this one is noticeable, tangible, a result you can actually point to. A milestone that proves you're no longer just trying. You're progressing, you're moving, you're rising. Even if it's small, it's yours. And for the first time, the gap between who you were and who you're becoming feels measurable. You look at that win with quiet pride, because you know the cost behind it. You know the nights it took, the battles no one saw, the discipline you enforced when your emotions collapsed. You know everything you had to overcome internally just to get that 1 inch forward. To you, this win is monumental. To the world, it's nothing. They shrugged. They nod politely. They barely react. Some don't even acknowledge it. You show them your progress, and their face barely changes. Maybe they say, "That's good," the same way someone reacts to hearing the weather forecast. Maybe they give you a neutral smile. Maybe they say nothing at all. And inside, a little frustration hits you, not because you need validation, but because this win matters to you, okay? And it feels strange to see something so significant treated as insignificant. But here's the truth. Your early results are not meant for them. They're meant for you. You think you want people to see your growth, but the universe is protecting you by making sure they don't. Because if people celebrated your early wins, you'd soften. If they praised you now, you'd slow down. If they validated you, you'd get comfortable too early. Their indifference is not an insult. Authentic. You are still fragile in this stage. Your new habits are young. Your momentum is fresh. Your identity is still under construction. Recognition right now would poison your discipline. Approval would make you relax prematurely. Tension would dilute your focus. You are not ready to be seen yet, not by them. So the universe hides your progress and shows it only to you. You look at that small win and feel a shift in your chest. Tightening, a strengthening, a click. Something internal whispers, "Keep going." The world doesn't hear it, but you do. And that whisper is more valuable than any applause. Because here's the uncomfortable reality. The world does not respect early effort. It only respects outcomes. People don't clap for the seed. They clap for the tree. They don't cheer the grind. They cheer the result. They don't celebrate potential. They celebrate proof. And your first signs of growth are still below their threshold of respect, but not yours. You know how far you've come. You know how hard the shift was. You know what it took to change your patterns. You know the internal war you had to fight just to reach this moment. And that makes this win priceless. It's not because it impresses them, but because it transforms you. That's why these early milestones matter. They don't change the world. They change your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying to improve. and start seeing yourself as someone who can improve. That distinction is enormous, because once you believe you can change, the entire structure of your life becomes flexible. You no longer feel trapped by past failures. You no longer feel limited by who you used to be. You no longer feel like your destiny is fixed. This small win becomes the first crack in the wall that kept you boxed in for years. And once the wall cracks, it doesn't stop. You start moving differently, walking differently, thinking differently. People around you can sense something, even if they can't articulate it. They might not see results, but they feel a shift in your energy, a harder edge, a sharper focus, a calmer confidence. You are not louder, but you're heavier. The world doesn't know it yet, but you're entering a new phase. The phase where belief becomes embodied. And here's the twist. Even though they don't notice your progress, you no longer need them to. Their silence doesn't bother you anymore. Their lack of support doesn't sting. Their lack of recognition no longer frustrates you, because now you understand this journey is not about proving to them that you can win. It's about proving to yourself that you can no longer lose. Your first real win didn't change how they see you. It changed how you see yourself. And that changes everything. Something shifts after your first real win. It's not loud. It's not obvious, but it's there, okay? In the tone of voices, in the way people look at you, okay? In the pauses that weren't there before. Your progress is still too small to be respected, but it's now big enough to be noticed. And that's when the energy around you starts to change. Not into support, into tension. Some people become quieter around you. Others become strangely critical. A few start giving advice you never asked for. Advice that sounds helpful on the surface, but carries a hidden message underneath. Slow down. They start questioning your methods, your pace, your priorities. You're overdoing it. You're obsessed. You're taking this too seriously. The same people who once ignored your effort now want to moderate it. That's not coincidence. That's threat perception. Because you're no longer just a dreamer to them. You're becoming proof that change is possible. And that makes people uncomfortable. As long as you had nothing, your ambition was harmless. But now that you've moved even slightly forward, your existence starts to challenge their excuses. You don't need to be successful yet to trigger insecurity. You only need to be consistent, okay? And consistency is loud. You begin to feel it in subtle forms. Jokes that hit a little too precise. Comments that don't feel random. Questions that sound curious, but are really comparisons. How much time do you really spend on this? Do you even enjoy your life anymore? Is it really worth all that effort? They're not asking because they care about your well-being. They're asking because your discipline mirrors their stagnation, and mirrors make people defensive. This is the stage where discouragement changes form. It's no longer direct doubt, becomes disguised concern. It's no longer, you can't do it. It becomes, just be careful. It's no longer, that's unrealistic. It becomes, don't burn yourself out. And if you're not sharp, you'll mistake resistance for support. Damning you, but you feel it in your body. Something is off. You sense the tension, the quiet competition, the shift in dynamics, the way your presence now alters the atmosphere, the way some people shrink a little when you enter the room, the way your growth makes others feel exposed. You're not imagining it. You've stepped into a new psychological territory, the space where progress creates friction. And friction always reveals truth. You start seeing who around you is genuinely rooting for your growth, and who is only comfortable with you because you weren't moving. Some relationships tighten, others crack. Some people become distant without explanation. Others suddenly reappear with forced friendliness. And through all of that, you learn something critical. Not everyone who smiles at you wants you to rise. Some people want to feel superior. Some want to feel safe. Some want you to stay familiar. Growth disrupts all of that. This is where your emotional discipline is tested at a new level. Before, you had to survive doubt and silence. Now, You must survive interference, opinions, comparisons, expectations, subtle pressure to slow your pace so the environment doesn't have to adjust to your speed, and it would be so easy to comply. Soften your ambition again, to blur your intensity, to dilute your standards, just enough to restore the old comfort. But comfort is exactly what you left behind. So now, the battle is not in your routine anymore. It's in your boundaries. You must decide who gets access to your energy, who gets access to your time, who gets access to your mind. Because distraction is no longer random, it's now targeted. People will start pulling at you emotionally, fighting you back into old habits, old conversations, old environments. Not out of malice, out of familiarity. They want the version of you that made them comfortable. But that version is dead. And this is where most people break. Not because they fail, but because they succeed just enough to attract resistance without being strong enough to withstand it. They underestimate how violent this phase is psychologically. Of course, the pressure is not external, it's interpersonal. It comes from the people they care about, the people they grew up with, the people whose approval still matters emotionally. To keep growing now, you must disappoint people. There's no way around it. You will be misunderstood again. You will be labeled selfish, cold, different. And the more disciplined you become, the less they recognize you. That hurts, but it's necessary. Because if you keep choosing emotional comfort over forward motion at this stage, you don't fall backwards dramatically, you slowly drift back into the life you are trying to escape. One compromise at a time. One justice once at a time. One softened standard at a time. So now the question is no longer, can you work hard? Can you stay hard when the world starts reacting? Can you grow without becoming defensive? Can you stay focused without becoming arrogant? Can you protect your path without turning bitter? This phase shapes your emotional spine, okay? And the way you handle it will decide whether your progress becomes temporary or permanent. Over time, your early wins stop feeling small. Not because they've grown dramatically, but because you have. It's the same result that once felt fragile, now feels inevitable. The same progress that once needed protection now stands on its own. What used to be a miracle has become a standard. And that's when something powerful happens. Your relationship with progress changes. In the beginning, you chased results. Now, you create them. In the beginning, you doubted your ability. Okay? Now, you doubt your excuses. In the beginning, you needed proof to believe. Okay? Now, you believe before proof arrives. This shift is internal, but its effects are everywhere. You become less reactive to outcomes, less attached to the highs, less devastated by the lows. You start moving with the calm of someone who knows their trajectory, even when the outside world still sees nothing. And while the people around you continue behaving as if your growth is irrelevant, you stop needing them to notice. Because now, your self-belief is no longer an emotion, it's infrastructure. The early phase of your journey was about survival. This phase is about construction. You're building a mindset capable of sustaining success long before success arrives. And the silence around you becomes your advantage. No one is watching closely enough to interfere. No one is paying attention enough to distract you. You are moving under the radar, and that anonymity is strategic. It gives you room to evolve without external pressure, okay? But this invisibility also reveals something uncomfortable. You were never lacking support. You were lacking strength. Now that you have a little strength, you realize you don't need applause. You don't crave understanding. You don't feel the urge to explain yourself. You feel something deeper, heavier, quieter, direction. You know where you're going, and you know what it will cost. And because that cost is becoming familiar, it no longer scares you. It energizes you. Your isolation becomes rhythm. Your discipline becomes instinct, okay? Your progress becomes predictable. This predictability is what separates you from who you used to be. Before, a single bad day could throw you off. A single doubt could derail your momentum. A single underwhelming result could crush your motivation. Now, you've seen enough internal evidence to know that one bad day doesn't define you. One slip doesn't destroy you. One setback doesn't reset your progress. You return automatically. You rebound faster. You resume without theatrics. That resilience is what the world can't see. Tout, but it's what will make you stand out. People still underestimate you because they measure your progress by visible milestones. They don't understand that the real transformation happened internally. They don't see how you think now, how you decide now, how you work now. They don't see the hours of repetition that hardened your mind. The nights where you showed up without emotion. The moments where you moved despite doubt. They only see the tip of the iceberg, not the structure below it. And that's fine. They're not supposed to see it yet. Because here's the truth. Nobody tells you your first big transformation is not physical. It's not financial. It's not social. It's structural. It's the construction of a mind that can support the life you're building. Most people want the outcome without building the container. They want success without becoming someone capable of handling it. They want recognition without resilience. And that's why they crumble the moment things get hard. Their belief was built on external approval. Yours is built on internal repetition. Your early wins didn't change them. They changed you. And that shift has consequences, okay? You stop letting people's opinions alter your direction. You stop taking critics seriously. You stop needing support to stay disciplined. You stop explaining. It's not because you're arrogant, but because you're focused. The more you progress, the more you realize how few people truly understand ambition. It's not the aesthetic of ambition, the psychology of it. It's the grind, the solitude, the identity shifts, the emotional battles. People romanticize success from the outside. They don't respect the interior workload required to build it. But you do, because you've lived it. That's why these first signs of real progress mean everything to you. Not because they're impressive, but because they prove that your self-belief wasn't hallucination. It was foresight, okay? They confirmed that the version of you that people doubted was actually the truest one. And now that you've tasted even a small fraction of your potential, you're no longer fighting to prove something to others. You're fighting to live up to the person you know you can become. The journey ahead is still long. The world still doubts. The environment still misunderstands. But deep inside, something irreversible has happened. You've seen what you're capable of, and you cannot unsee it. Your first wins didn't make you successful. Okay, made you inevitable. At some point, the world you came from can no longer hold the version of you that you're becoming. It doesn't collapse all at once. There is no explosion, no dramatic goodbye. It's the slow, uncomfortable misalignment between your new standards and your old environment. What once felt familiar now feels restrictive. What once felt normal now feels heavy. And what once felt safe now feels like a ceiling. You start noticing it in small ways. The conversations that used to entertain you now feel empty. The complaints that once felt relatable now sound repetitive. The advice that once guided you now feels outdated. You sit in rooms where everyone is still discussing the same fears, the same limits, the same excuses, and you realize, quietly, that you no longer belong there. Not because you're better, but because you're no longer the same. And this is one of the most disorienting phases of growth, because nothing is technically wrong. Your old life isn't bad. Your people aren't evil. Your environment isn't toxic. It's too small now, too slow, too comfortable. Okay. And that subtle realization creates guilt. Okay. Because you start feeling ungrateful for wanting more. You catch yourself thinking, who am I to want something different? You feel the pressure to stay loyal to what's familiar, to not outgrow people, to not seem ungrateful. Okay. So you try to balance both worlds. Okay. You keep your new habits, but you return to old patterns socially. You maintain your discipline, but you soften your intensity around others. You downplay your goals so you don't make anyone uncomfortable. And for a while, you think you can live this way, half evolving, half attached. Can't, because growth is not something you can pause emotionally while continuing physically. Your identity is changing whether you like it or not. Your tolerance for stagnation is shrinking. Your patience for excuses is disappearing. Your appetite for comfort is dying. And the more you evolve internally, the more painful it becomes to pretend that nothing has changed. This is where friction becomes unavoidable. You start seeing reactions, confusion, distance, subtle judgment, awkward silence when you speak differently than before. Some people feel left behind. Others feel challenged. Some feel judged, even when you've said nothing. Okay? They sense the shift, even if you never announce it. And that's when you learn a brutal truth. Sometimes, just changing is enough to become a problem. You didn't attack anyone. You didn't criticize anyone. You didn't force your path on anyone. You just move forward. And that alone is enough to disrupt the balance. This is the stage where many people sabotage themselves socially to avoid discomfort. They slow down their growth to preserve relationships. They lower their standards to keep the peace. They return to old habits to feel included again. And on the surface, it looks like maturity. It looks like compromise. It looks like balance. But internally, it's betrayal. Betrayal of the person you fought to become. Betrayal of the discipline you built in isolation. Betrayal of the belief that carried you through the darkness. You didn't break yourself just to rebuild the same cage. You didn't suffer through doubt just to settle back into safety. You didn't become this version of yourself to hide it for the comfort of others. This is the phase where you realize that growth has a social cost, and it's non-negotiable. You will lose people. Not always dramatically. Sometimes slowly, quietly, through fading conversations and unanswered messages, through invitations that stop coming, through silence that grows where connection used to be. And that hurts, because even when you choose your future, you still mourn your past. You miss who you used to laugh with. You miss the simplicity. You miss not feeling different. But you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you know. You can't return to a smaller life once your nervous system has tasted expansion. So now you stand at a psychological crossroads. On one side, familiarity, acceptance, comfort, belonging. On the other, isolation, uncertainty, growth, misalignment with your past. Both have a price, but only one has a future. This is the moment where your journey stops being just personal and becomes relational. Your decisions now alter not just your life, but how you exist in the lives of others. You feel it, the tension, the quiet resistance, the invisible pulling in two directions. And right here, most people hesitate. They don't quit their dream, they just delay it socially. They don't stop growing, they just mute it. They don't abandon their future, they just postpone it to stay comfortable a little longer. But deep inside, they know. And you know too. You didn't come this far just to become a quieter version of your old self. You came this far to become something entirely new. As you continue to grow, a heavy emotion starts creeping in, one that almost no one prepares you for. Guilt. Not the kind that comes from doing something wrong, but the kind that comes from doing something right, that separates you from your past. You look around and realize you're no longer struggling in the same way as the people you once identified with. Your mindset is different. Your discipline is different. Your priorities are different. And instead of feeling proud, you feel uneasy. You feel guilty for wanting more. Guilty for moving faster. Guilty for no longer relating to the same fears. Guilty for seeing solutions where others see walls. You start questioning yourself. Am I changing too much? Am I becoming cold? Am I losing empathy? You catch yourself minimizing your progress in conversation, softening your language, downplaying your ambitions. It's not because you lack confidence, but because You don't want to create distance. You don't want to make anyone feel small. You don't want to be the one who outgrew others. So you shrink emotionally. You pretend to still be confused when you're no longer lost. You pretend to still be doubting when you're already committed. You pretend to still be struggling when you've learned to manage the weight. And the strangest part, people rarely ask you to do this directly. They don't tell you, slow down your growth for us. They just express discomfort in quieter ways. Jokes about how serious you've become. Remarks about how you're always working. Suggestions that you should relax a little. Nostalgia for how things used to be. And each of those comments carries the same unspoken request. Come back to who you were, because who you were was predictable. Who you're becoming is uncertain, and uncertainty makes people anxious. So you find yourself standing in a subtle emotional war. On one side is your future, the version of you that's finally aligned with their potential. On the other side is your past, your tribe, your roots, your shared history. And every forward step feels like a betrayal to someone you care about. That weight is crushing. This is where many people unknowingly commit their greatest act of self-sabotage. They slow their growth to preserve emotional comfort in their relationships. They don't quit. They don't collapse. They don't give up loudly, simply dim themselves. They show up 70% instead of 100. They hold back their hunger. They keep one foot in the old world just in case. And over time, that hesitation begins to rot the very thing they were building. Their discipline becomes inconsistent. Their vision loses sharpness. Their urgency dulls. They start making excuses that sound noble. I'm just trying to be balanced. There's more to life than success. I don't want to become obsessed. But underneath those words is fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being judged for choosing a different path. And here's the brutal truth. Growth does not wait for group consensus. You don't rise when everyone is ready. You rise when you are ready. If every person who ever surpassed their environment waited for emotional approval, no one would ever escape the gravity of their starting point. You don't betray people by evolving. You betray yourself by stopping. But that truth is painful to accept, because you still care. You still love. You still remember where you came from. And that's what makes this phase so psychologically violent. You're not choosing between right and wrong, okay? You're choosing between loyalty to your past and loyalty to your future, okay? And no matter what you choose, something will hurt, okay? If you stay the same, you hurt internally, okay? If you evolve, you hurt relationally. Most people choose the pain they can explain to others instead of the pain they'd have to admit to themselves. They stay small because it feels socially safer than becoming large. But you've already tasted what alignment feels like. You've already felt what it's like to move with purpose, to build with discipline, to suffer with meaning. And that taste ruins the comfort of stagnation forever. No matter how hard you try to emotionally downshift, a part of you resists. It feels suffocated. It feels frustrated. It feels restless. You start feeling resentment, not toward others, but toward yourself for pretending to be smaller than you are. And that resentment is a warning. It's telling you that you're about to betray your future to protect your past. The guilt you feel right now is not proof that you're doing something wrong. It's proof that you're crossing an identity threshold. You're stepping into a version of yourself that your old relationships were not built to contain. That doesn't make those relationships bad. It just makes them incomplete for who you're becoming. You don't need to abandon people to grow, but you do need to stop asking their permission. And that is a painful skill to learn. There is a moment where you finally stop trying to bridge the two worlds. You don't announce it. You don't dramatize it. You don't make a speech. You simply stop forcing compatibility between who you were and who you are becoming. And that quiet decision changes everything. You no longer try to explain your intensity. You no longer try to justify your pace. You no longer try to dilute your ambition to make it more digestible. Not because you've become cold, but because you've become honest. You realize that the more you try to be understood by people who don't share your direction, the more you fracture yourself internally. Every explanation feels like a defense. Every justification feels like weakness. Every compromise feels like erosion. And one day, you finally understand that your future doesn't require your past to approve of it. That realization hurts, but it also frees you, because now you stop waiting for synchronized growth. You stop hoping that one day everyone will catch up and everything will feel aligned again. You accept the truth that most people evolve in different directions, then that divergence is not betrayal, it's simply reality. This is where your identity stabilizes. You've already lost the version of yourself that needed permission. You've already outgrown the version that needed validation. You've already buried the version that negotiated with fear. What remains is quieter, heavier, more resolved. You don't feel the need to prove anything anymore. Not to them, not to yourself. Your actions are no longer fueled by rebellion or reaction. They're fueled by alignment. You work because it's your nature now. You grow because it's your baseline. You choose discomfort because comfort feels too small for your nervous system. This is not motivation. This is orientation. You move differently through rooms now. Not louder, not more dominant, but more anchored. You don't scan for approval. You don't adjust your posture to social pressure. You don't change your language to sound more acceptable. You are not rude. You are not superior. You're simply uncompromising with your direction, and that confuses people. Some will interpret your silence as distance. Some will interpret your discipline as arrogance. Some will interpret your focus as emotional absence. Let them. You've reached a stage where clarity matters more than interpretation. You understand that not everyone is meant to walk with you into this next chapter. Some people were meant to build you. Others were meant to test you. And some were simply meant to remind you of who you used to be. Not everyone is meant to follow you forward. And you no longer fight that truth. You carry gratitude without attachment, respect without dependence, memory without obligation. That's emotional adulthood. This is the phase where your environment truly begins to change, not through dramatic breakups, but through natural gravity. You spend more time alone, not because you're isolated, but because fewer people can access where you're going. Your calendar becomes quieter socially and louder operationally. Your circle gets smaller, but denser. Less noise, more signal, and with that shift comes a strange peace. Not happiness, not excitement. Peace. The peace of not being split between two identities. The peace of not acting one way in private and another in public. The peace of not apologizing internally for wanting what you want. You no longer feel guilty for your ambition. You no longer feel ashamed of your hunger. You no longer feel the need to explain your evolution. You finally let yourself become dangerous to the life you used to live. And here's the part most people don't realize. Once this internal break happens, regression becomes almost impossible. You can slow down, you can stumble, you can feel tired, but you can't unknow who you are now. You've crossed too many internal lines. You've built too much psychological mass. You've earned too much self-respect. Your old life no longer fits your nervous system. Even if you tried to go back, you'd feel claustrophobic. Even if you tried to pretend again, the act would exhaust you. The gap between who you might appear to be and who you actually are would be unbearable. So you stop pretending. You stand in who you are, without noise, without explanation, without apology. And that's when your life truly begins to pivot. Not because your circumstances changed overnight, but because you did. You are no longer trying to escape your old world. You are already operating from a new one. This is the final cut. The internal divorce. The quiet separation between who you were built to be and who you allowed yourself to become. From this point on, the question is no longer whether you will grow, it's how far. There comes a moment when the vision you've been holding in your mind stops feeling like a fantasy and starts feeling like a responsibility. It's not something you want, something you must build. And that shift becomes the foundation of the new identity you're stepping into. You're no longer driven by dreams. You're driven by obligation, not to others, but to the future version of yourself who is counting on you. This is where your mindset evolves from emotional to structural. You begin moving with a different kind of intention. Your actions are no longer reactions to doubt or fear or external pressure. They come from alignment, from clarity, from an internal compass that has finally stopped spinning. You don't need hype to move. You don't need permission to start. You don't need encouragement to keep going. Your self-belief has matured into something quieter but far more powerful. Self-governance. In the past, you were controlled by your environment, by how people spoke to you, by who believed in you, by the noise around you. If things felt supportive, you moved forward. They felt hostile or uncertain, you hesitated. But that version of you is gone now. You've outgrown the emotional volatility that once dictated your pace. You no longer adjust based on the mood of the world. You adjust based on the demands of your vision. Your internal narrative changes as well. You stop asking questions like, can I do this? Start asking questions like, what must I become to do this? It's a different framework entirely. One is rooted in doubt. The other is rooted in identity. When you think like this, your standards rise automatically. You no longer negotiate with your excuses. You evaluate them. You no longer fear your weaknesses. You study them. You no longer hide from your flaws. You dissect them. You become the architect of yourself. And that version of you, the builder, the operator, the executor, doesn't get excited by hope. He gets excited by discipline. He gets excited by repetition, okay? He gets excited by seeing the small, unglamorous pieces of self-mastery begin to align, okay? That's when you realize something shocking. Your new life is not built by breakthroughs. It's built by behaviors, daily decisions, daily discipline, daily reinforcement of who you are becoming. This is also when you stop comparing yourself to others entirely. Comparison loses meaning when you understand that most people are not even playing the same game. They're driven by validation. You're driven by vision. They're motivated by comfort. You're motivated by purpose. They want to feel good. You want to become strong, okay? And those two paths do not intersect. So the jealousy disappears. The envy evaporates. The pressure to be ahead fades. You stop caring about what anyone else is doing because you understand that your journey is engineered specifically for you. No one has your mind. No one has your pain tolerance. No one has your calling. Trying to compare lives makes as much sense as comparing destinies, and you're no longer foolish enough to do it. Instead, you compare yourself to who you were yesterday, and that's the only comparison that matters. This internal competition is cleaner, sharper, more honest, because you can't lie to yourself. You know when you slacked. You know when you coasted. You know when you gave 70% and pretended it was 100%. And as your identity strengthens, you become allergic to your own excuses. Not because your standards are unrealistic, but because you finally recognize the cost of abandoning yourself. You'll realize that every time you betray your discipline, you don't just delay progress, you fracture your identity. You weaken the internal trust you've spent months rebuilding. And once you understand that, self-betrayal becomes unbearable. Your new mindset becomes uncompromising, not rigid, not obsessive. It's clear. There is no confusion about what you must do. There is no negotiation about who you must become. There is no hesitation about the sacrifices required. And that clarity gives you an advantage that most people never experience: emotional predictability. You no longer rely on feelings to determine your actions. You rely on decisions, on structure, on standards. Your emotions still exist. They just don't sit in the driver's seat anymore. It's what dangerous people understand. This is what high performers embody. This is what separates those who dream from those who transform. You've entered the phase where your self-belief is not a feeling, it's a system. You no longer wait for proof. You create it. You no longer wait for readiness. You generate it. You no longer wait for the world to support you. You support yourself with action, not affirmation. And once you cross that threshold, something irreversible happens. You stop fearing what's ahead. You start fearing what would happen if you stopped, because now you know the cost of returning to your old self, and it's far greater than the cost of becoming your new one. At some point, you realize something unsettling. The version of you who needed to be seen is gone. Not because you became invisible, because you became independent. You stop checking if people notice your effort. You stop replaying conversations in your head. You stop wondering what they think. Not out of arrogance, out of freedom. This is emotional independence. Before, your mood was tied to reactions. Okay? If they supported you, you felt strong. If they doubted you, you felt small. If they ignored you, you felt invisible. Your nervous system was outsourced. Now, it isn't. You wake up and your drive is already there. You work and your focus doesn't depend on encouragement. You build and your energy doesn't collapse when the room is quiet. You've disconnected your self-worth from spectators. That's rare, and that's dangerous. Most people never escape the psychological leash of validation. They chase likes, praise, recognition, applause, and when it disappears, their discipline collapses with it. They were never driven by purpose. They were driven by response. The moment the response fades, so do they. That you learned how to operate in silence. You trained when no one clapped. You built when no one watched. You struggled when no one cared. So now, attention feels optional. This changes how you move through the world. You no longer try to impress. You no longer exaggerate. You no longer inflate your stories. You no longer signal your ambition to feel powerful. You don't need to announce what you're becoming. You're too busy becoming it. Your confidence becomes unsettling to people because it doesn't seek approval. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't adjust to be liked. It simply exists. Some will interpret that as coldness, others as arrogance, some as mystery. None of that matters, because for the first time, your identity is no longer being negotiated socially. You are not calibrating yourself to the room. You are not editing your hunger to be digestible. You are not reducing your discipline to avoid standing out. You are what you are, whether it fits the environment or not. And here's the uncomfortable truth. When you stop needing approval, you also stop being controllable. People can no longer guide your behavior with praise or punishment. They can't motivate you with compliments. They can't paralyze you with criticism. Your direction is internally regulated. This is where you become extremely hard to manipulate, because manipulation feeds on insecurity, on the need to belong, on the fear of rejection. You've outgrown those levers. You still care about people. You still feel emotion. You still notice energy, but none of it determines your movement anymore. You work when you feel heavy. You show up when you feel detached. You stay disciplined when you feel misunderstood. You no longer wait to feel good to act. This is the phase where your nervous system becomes stable under pressure. Your highs are quieter. Your lows are shorter. You don't spike emotionally the way you used to. You don't crash the way you used to. You've learned to operate from baseline instead of from adrenaline. That stability is terrifying to people who live off emotional chaos. They don't understand how you can move without drama, how you can progress without noise, how you can be intense without being reactive. They look for cracks, for weakness, for contradiction. They don't find much, because your life is no longer a performance. It's a process. And processes don't seek audiences. They seek outcomes. You start to feel a strange separation from the emotional economy of the world. You notice how most people rise and fall based on external feedback, how their energy spikes with praise and flatlines with silence, how their confidence fluctuates with attention, how their motivation depends on how they're perceived, and you realize you no longer live there. You've migrated to something lonelier, but far more powerful. You don't feel energized by being seen. You feel energized by alignment. You don't feel powerful when you're celebrated. You feel powerful when you execute. You don't feel validated when others respect you. You feel validated when you respect yourself. That shift rewires everything. Your relationships change, your conversations change, your reactions change. You become less performative and more functional, less expressive and more grounded, less reactive and more deliberate. You don't rush to defend yourself. You don't rush to correct people. You don't rush to explain. You let time speak. And time always speaks louder than emotions. This is when people start to feel that they can't read you anymore, because you're no longer leaking your internal state through compulsive expression. You don't telegraph insecurity. You don't broadcast doubt. You don't externalize internal storms. You've learned to contain yourself. That containment is what gives you gravity. You enter rooms differently now. Leave impressions without trying. You carry weight without volume. And the more you detach your movement from approval, the more unstoppable your trajectory becomes. Because now, nothing external can speed you up, and nothing external can slow you down. You are no longer fueled by the world. You are fueled by design. There is a final shift in this phase that most people never reach. It happens when you stop feeling like you're on a journey and start feeling like you're simply living according to law. Not motivation, not mood, not emotion. Law, the law of who you are now. You don't wake up asking if you'll stay disciplined today. You wake up expecting it, like gravity, like breath, like inevitability. This is sovereignty. You are no longer ruled by impulse. It's no longer ruled by reaction. No longer ruled by environment. Your inner world is no longer democratic. It is governed. You decide first. You feel later. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you clean. In the past, your emotions were your compass. When you felt inspired, you moved. When you felt discouraged, you slowed. When you felt unseen, you collapsed. Your life was a reflection of your internal weather. But now, your emotions have been demoted. They still exist, but they no longer vote. They inform, they do not command. You feel fear, you move anyway. You feel doubt, you execute anyway. You feel resistance, you proceed anyway, not because you're numb, but because you're sovereign. This is where your self-belief becomes unshakable, not because it's loud, but because it's no longer negotiable. You no longer debate your own worth. You no longer reassess your direction every time discomfort appears. You no longer collapse into self-questioning when progress slows. You understand that friction is not a signal to stop, it's a feature of the path. Your nervous system adapts to pressure. You stop interpreting tension as danger. You stop interpreting slowness as failure. You stop interpreting fatigue as defeat. You interpret all of it as data, and that changes everything. Because now, pain doesn't destabilize you. It calibrates you. Its criticism doesn't derail you. It refines you. Silence doesn't frighten you. Focuses you. You've built a mind that no longer panics when conditions are imperfect. You execute in uncertainty. You progress in obscurity. You operate without guarantees. And most people will never understand how dangerous that makes you, because they only move when the conditions are favorable. You move when the conditions are irrelevant. This is the point where you stop being motivated and start being directed. Your days no longer feel dramatic. Feel deliberate. You don't need the emotional highs anymore. You don't need to feel powerful to be powerful. You don't need to feel confident to be effective. You don't need to feel certain to be consistent. Your life becomes less cinematic, and far more lethal. You begin to realize that real power is boring to watch from the outside. It doesn't look like fireworks. It looks like routine. It looks like restraint. It looks like restraint, repeated until it becomes dominance. And that's why people underestimate it, because they're addicted to spectacle. They wait for moments. You build momentum. Your self-belief now has weight, not the kind that shows up in words. It's the kind that shows up in decisions. You don't announce your boundaries, you enforce them. You don't argue your values, you execute them. You don't defend your identity, you live it. That's what sovereignty looks like. And this is where your relationship with fear changes permanently. Fear doesn't disappear, but it loses status. It becomes a sensation, not a signal. It becomes background noise, not a guide. You feel it in your chest and keep walking. You feel it in your stomach and keep building. You feel it in your thoughts and keep choosing action. You no longer protect your comfort, you protect your direction. And direction is stronger than fear. You start to see the world clearly now. You notice how most people live in reaction loops, reacting to news, reacting to opinions, reacting to emotion, reacting to the behavior of others. Their lives are volatile because they are powered by external input. Yours is not. Your energy comes from internal structure. Your confidence comes from repeated action. Your calm comes from predictability within yourself. You've become someone who can be left alone with a goal and trusted to move. That is the rarest type of person on earth. You don't need supervision. You don't need hype. You don't need fear. You need a target. That's it. And now, the most dangerous part of your evolution reveals itself. You are no longer fighting insecurity. You are now managing momentum. This is no longer the phase of survival. It's the phase of direction. You don't ask, can I? You ask, how efficiently? You don't ask, what if I fail? You ask, how fast can I correct? That orientation changes your entire future. Because once a human being becomes sovereign over their own movement, nothing external can permanently enslave them again. Not doubt, not judgment, not pressure, not comfort, not chaos. You don't belong to reaction anymore. You belong to intention. And from this point forward, your life will no longer be defined by what happens to you, but by what you decide to build next. There comes a stage where your consistency starts producing results that can no longer be dismissed as luck. It's not overnight success. It's not a breakthrough. It's accumulation. It's quiet, steady, undeniable accumulation. The kind that makes people pause mid-sentence when they look at you. The kind that shifts the tone of conversations even if nobody addresses it directly. The kind that forces the world to see that something is happening if they can't explain it. Your progress has weight now. Not dramatic weight, not Hollywood weight, but structural weight. Your discipline is visible in your posture. Your clarity is visible in your decisions. Your identity is visible in your patterns. People who once doubted you start tilting their head when they hear you speak. People who ignored your effort now ask subtle questions. People who dismissed your vision now watch you with quiet curiosity. They don't say it out loud, but something in their eyes reveals the truth. I didn't think you'd get this far. They still underestimate you, but they're no longer comfortable doing it publicly. That's the first sign of real momentum. And here's what's fascinating. You don't feel the need to capitalize on it. In the past, you might have been tempted to announce your progress, to prove them wrong, to show the world you were right. Now, you don't care. Their recognition feels irrelevant. Their approval feels unnecessary. Their attention feels distracting. You didn't build this to impress them. You built this to become someone you respect. This is where your internal world surpasses your external one. You start operating from standards so high that the compliments you used to crave now feel like noise. Even your own wins don't inflate you the way they used to. You celebrate briefly, then return to work not because you're ungrateful, but because you finally understand the truth. What you're building is bigger than momentary highs. The world begins noticing your results slowly, like a sunrise. But you've already lived the entire night that created them, and that difference changes how you interpret everything. When someone says you're doing great, you know they're only seeing the surface. When someone says, I'm impressed, you know they have no idea what it took. When someone says, you're lucky, You don't even react anymore because your relationship with progress has matured. It's no longer emotional. It's operational. You measure yourself by execution, not admiration. You track consistency, not compliments. You pursue mastery, not applause. That scares people more than success itself, because most people rely on external pressure to move. They need deadlines, accountability, supervision, fear of consequence. You move because it's who you are now, and that makes you unpredictable. It makes you uncontrollable. It makes you someone whose trajectory can't be derailed by opinion. This is where you start to outpace people without even trying. Not because you're running faster, but because they keep stopping. Stopping to celebrate. Stopping to complain. Stopping to rest. Stopping because someone doubted them. Stopping because things got hard. You don't stop, and that difference compounds. Over weeks, it creates separation. Over months, it creates momentum. Over years, it creates a gap that can never be closed. And here's the ironic part. Even as the world begins to acknowledge your growth, you become more invisible emotionally. Not in a sad way, but in a sovereign way. You don't rise and fall with their reactions. You don't get pulled into drama. You don't chase relevance. You move like someone who has nothing to prove and everything to build. That calm is intimidating. People start asking you for advice not because they think you're a genius, but because they feel the weight of your discipline. They feel your seriousness. They feel your commitment, okay? They feel your refusal to compromise, okay? And even if they don't fully understand it, they sense that you're operating at a frequency they can't reach without changing themselves. You've become a mirror for others now, not because you preach, but because you exist. A reminder of what consistency looks like. A reminder of what self-belief looks like. A reminder of what focus looks like. Some people respond with admiration. Others respond with jealousy. Most respond with confusion. But none of that changes your direction, because you're no longer driven by emotion. You're driven by inevitability. You've crossed the threshold where you're no longer trying to make it. You're in the phase where it would be impossible for you not to. Not because success is guaranteed, but because stopping is no longer an option your identity can tolerate. And that's the moment where your momentum becomes frightening, not just to the world, but to your old self, as it finally understands that it can't come with you anymore. The strange thing about progress is that people only start paying attention when it reaches a level they can no longer pretend not to see. Up until now, they could shrug it off, call it luck, call it a phase, call it cute. But when your results reach a certain threshold, still not massive, but consistent enough to be undeniable, everything changes. The reactions shift, not into support, into surveillance. People start watching you more closely. They ask more questions. They inspect your routines. They study your habits with a mix of fascination and discomfort. They want to understand what you're doing, but they also want to find something wrong with it, because acknowledging your progress means confronting their stagnation. They won't admit that, of course. Instead, they'll disguise it as curiosity. How did you do that? What's your secret? How are you so consistent? They're not really asking to learn. They're asking to measure. They want to know whether you're still within reach, whether they can still mentally categorize you as one of us. But deep down, they feel the truth. You're slipping away, not socially, energetically. Your mindset no longer mirrors theirs. Your habits no longer match theirs. Your standards no longer accommodate theirs. And when people feel someone rising beyond the limits they accepted for themselves, insecurity appears in the form of subtle resistance. It's never obvious, never direct, never loud. Comes as jokes that hit too close to the truth. Comments disguised as concern. Hints that you're changing too fast. Reminders to stay grounded. Warnings to not get ahead of yourself. What they're really saying is, don't become someone who makes me uncomfortable. Don't expand into a life that highlights my inaction. Don't evolve into a version of yourself I can't emotionally manage. Your progress threatens the equilibrium of their identity. Because as long as you were struggling, they felt safe. As long as you were doubting, they felt equal. As long as you were stuck, they felt justified. But now there's a comparison they can't avoid. Not because you're flaunting anything, but because your presence alone has changed. You walk with more certainty. You speak with more clarity. You operate with more intention. And even if you try to hide it, the shift leaks through. People respond in different ways. Some will become competitive. They'll suddenly start posting more, working more, announcing plans louder not to grow, but to keep up appearances. Some will become distant, not because they dislike you, but because your drive makes them confront their own lack of it. Some will try to attach themselves to you, not because they support you, but because they want proximity to your momentum. And some will become quietly resentful, not openly. It's just enough for the air to change. You'll feel it in the pauses before they respond, in the way they downplay your wins, in the way they highlight your mistakes, in the way they bring up your past as if it defines you. They're not trying to hurt you. They're trying to anchor you. 'Cause if they can keep you partially in the past, they won't lose you completely to the future. And this is where your psychological strength is tested again. Because in this phase, the resistance isn't coming from strangers. It's coming from familiar faces. People who once saw you as equal now subtly treat you as a threat. People who once encouraged you now question your pace. People who once joked with you now joke about you, and your old self wants to react, to defend, to explain, to reassure. But your new self knows better. You've learned that people's reactions say more about their internal battles than your external progress. Their insecurity isn't your responsibility. Their fear isn't your weight to carry. Their discomfort isn't your signal to shrink. You can't sacrifice your evolution to protect someone else's stagnation. So you don't argue, you don't justify, you don't bend, you stay focused. Because you finally understood that this resistance is not a sign that you're going the wrong way, a sign that you are becoming too undeniable to ignore. Your growth is now visible enough to disturb people who never expected you to rise. And the discomfort they project onto you is simply confirmation of one thing. Your direction is correct. Your momentum is real. Your trajectory is accelerating. They aren't resisting you. They're resisting what your progress reveals about them. And once you see that clearly, their reactions stop being emotional obstacles and start becoming indicators. Indicators that you're outgrowing the gravity that once held you. Indicators that your pace no longer matches your surroundings. Indicators that you're beginning to separate from the version of life that once defined you. Your job now isn't to slow down. It's to keep going long enough for the noise to fade again. This time because you've moved beyond their reach. There's a phase that looks like success from the outside, but feels like a trap on the inside. It's the moment where things are finally working. Not perfectly. It's not at the level you once imagined, but enough to breathe, enough to relax a little, enough to feel like maybe the fight is over.